We've talked about the three personas of DNS in cybersecurity. DNS is a facilitator, DNS is a hostage, and today I want to talk a bit about DNS as a weapon. A denial of service attack is basically an attempt to take a critical service offline, make that critical service unavailable for valid traffic, thus harming who's being attacked. DNS ends up being a pretty good weapon when it comes to a denial of service attack. Because it's easy to launch, DNS is a fairly accessible protocol. There are scads of toolkits available. It doesn't take a lot of compute to generate a lot of DNS data. It's somewhat easy to hide. There are tons of open resolvers on the internet that can recurse traffic to a target. DNS is fairly easy to spoof, and therefore the source of the actual address can be spoofed, which makes it very difficult for an operator of a DNS server to defend against. And also it's very easy to amplify. DNS attacks can be amplified at a ratio of like 75:1. You have something like 80 bytes going out, generating 4 kilobytes as an attack. So if we can amplify it, we can hide it, it's accessible to launch, and the target potentially taking out DNS of, for instance, a financial institution is pretty painful for that institution. If we take out their external DNS, then we take out their presence on the internet. Their customers can't connect with them at all. So how is DNS used in a distributed denial of service attack? First, how do we generate the volume? We can either generate that volume ourselves, build our own compute, launch that compute at certain places around the world and drive tons of DNS traffic, maybe through open resolvers, or we can leverage somebody else's compute. And that's where botnets come into play. Botnets that we've seen in the wild, like Mirai, can infect hundreds of thousands, if not millions of hosts out there, and botnet command and control can then instruct those to launch a massively distributed attack. As all of that DNS data comes from infected or purposeful clients, perhaps through an ISP's DNS servers, to the actual target, perhaps this financial institution, all of that data in sum will eventually deny DNS service for this institution, and therefore its customers can't contact it. What ends up happening as well is valid traffic. Users that are actually trying to use this service for good can't access it because it's being flooded, and they start retrying. So you get this amplification of just valid requests retrying. Further, in what's called a reflection amplification, sometimes these packets are spoofed to make it look like it's coming from another institution. So I can bounce a DNS request off of, let's say, a US government site that might be signed with DNSSEC, gain massive amplification, and bounce that back to the bank. Multiple ways this can be done. From an enterprise perspective, we're starting to see evidence of infected hosts within the enterprises that are participating in these attacks. So an enterprise might be unwittingly launching part of this attack. The knock-on effect is this enterprise has a DNS resolver that's recursing to the internet that is critical for its business. Inside, we need to get outside. And that DNS server can be knocked out as well as it is flooded, pushing all these requests to the bank. So there's knock-on effects for not just the person or the institution being attacked, but also for the DNS infrastructure that's attacking it. It creates mayhem. It's very difficult to mitigate and not particularly difficult to launch. It ends up that DNS is a fairly good naive producer for distributed denial of service attacks.